The blood on his porch glistened dark and wet in the pre-dawn light, and Owen Oakley knew before he even opened his door that someone was dying on his doorstep. He had risen early that September morning in 1882, as he always did on his ranch outside Hot Springs, South Dakota, planning to check on his cattle before the day grew too warm. The moment he stepped onto the wooden planks of his porch, his boot nearly slipped in the crimson pool spreading beneath a crumpled figure. A woman lay face down, her dress torn and soaked through with blood, her dark hair matted against her pale neck. For a heartbeat, Owen stood frozen, his mind racing through possibilities. Raiders, bandits, animals. Then his instincts kicked in, honed from years of frontier living where hesitation meant death. He dropped to his knees beside her, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he checked for a pulse. It fluttered weakly beneath his fingertips, barely there, but stubborn. She was alive, but barely. Owen wasted no time. He gathered her into his arms, noting how light she felt, despite being a grown woman, and kicked his door open wider. Her head lolled against his chest as he carried her inside, leaving a trail of blood droplets across his floor that he would deal with later. His home was sparse but clean, a single room divided by function rather than walls. He laid her carefully on his bed, the only real piece of furniture he owned besides a table and 2 chairs. The morning light filtering through his window revealed the extent of her injuries. A deep gash ran along her left side, from her ribs down to her hip. Her dress was shredded there, the fabric stiff with dried and drying blood. More wounds marked her arms and hands, defensive cuts that spoke of a struggle. Owen lit every lamp he had, flooding the room with light. His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he gathered supplies. Water from the pump, clean cloths, needle and thread, whiskey for sterilizing, bandages he kept for injured livestock. He had doctored plenty of animals in his 30 years, and once he had helped the town physician with a gunshot wound. This was different. This was a woman, young and helpless, bleeding out on his bed. He cut away what remained of her dress, trying to maintain what modesty he could while exposing the wounds. The gash along her side was the worst, deep enough that he could see muscle and tissue beneath. It needed stitching immediately. He poured whiskey over his needle and thread, then over the wound itself. She did not even flinch. That worried him more than anything. Owen began to stitch, his jaw clenched in concentration. Each puncture of the needle through her skin made his stomach clench, but he forced himself to continue. The wound was long, requiring dozens of careful stitches. His back ached from bending over her, and sweat dripped down his face despite the cool morning air. He worked through the smaller cuts next, cleaning and bandaging each one. Her hands were a mess of defensive wounds, and he wondered what she had fought off. Or who. As the sun climbed higher, painting his walls gold, Owen finally finished with the last bandage. The woman had not stirred once during his hours of work. Her breathing remained shallow, her face pale as chalk. He covered her with his only blanket, then stood back to assess his work. She would live or die based on factors beyond his control now. Blood loss, infection, internal injuries he could not see. All he could do was wait. Owen cleaned up the blood, both from his floor and his porch, burning the rags in his stove. He changed his own shirt, which had been soaked through with her blood, and made coffee. The normalcy of the action felt strange after the intensity of the morning. He sat at his table, watching her chest rise and fall with each breath, and wondered who she was. She was beautiful, even in her current state. Dark hair spread across his pillow, skin that would be olive-toned when not drained of blood, delicate features that spoke of careful breeding. Her hands, despite the cuts, were not the work-roughened hands of a frontier woman. She was from back east, he would wager. What was an eastern woman doing alone in South Dakota, injured and bleeding? The day passed slowly. Owen forced himself to do his chores, checking on the woman between each task. He brought water up from the well, fed his 2 horses, inspected his small herd of cattle, normal rancher duties that felt surreal given the unconscious woman in his bed. He shot a rabbit for dinner, though he had no appetite. By evening, she still had not woken. He made broth from the rabbit, thinking she might need something gentle when she finally came to. If she came to. Owen had seen men die from less blood loss. He sat beside the bed, spooning tiny amounts of broth between her lips, hoping some would trickle down her throat. Most of it just ran down her chin, but he kept trying. Night fell, and Owen pulled his chair closer to the bed. He would not sleep tonight. If she woke, she would be frightened and disoriented. If she took a turn for the worse, he needed to be there. He studied her face in the lamplight, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the arch of her brow. She looked peaceful now, almost as if she were simply sleeping. But the bandages wrapping her torso told a different story. Somewhere past midnight, she stirred. It was subtle at first, just a twitch of her fingers, a flutter of her eyelids. Owen leaned forward, his heart suddenly pounding. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused and glassy with fever. They were green, he noticed. Deep green like pine needles. "Easy," he said softly, keeping his voice low and calm. "You are safe. You are in my home." Her eyes found his face, but he was not sure she truly saw him. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Owen reached for the cup of water he had kept ready, lifting her head gently and holding the cup to her lips. She managed a few sips before her eyes closed again, and she drifted back into unconsciousness. But it was a start. Owen felt a flicker of hope for the first time since he had found her. She had wakened, even briefly. That meant her body was fighting. He settled back in his chair, allowing himself to believe she might actually survive. The next 3 days followed a similar pattern. Owen tended her wounds, changed her bandages, tried to get water and broth into her. She drifted in and out of consciousness, never fully awake but showing signs of improvement. The bleeding had stopped, and the stitches were holding. He watched for signs of infection, the red streaks and putrid smell that would mean death was coming. But her wounds remained clean. On the 4th day, she opened her eyes with clarity for the first time. Owen was at the stove, making more broth, when he heard her voice. "Where am I?" He turned quickly, ladle still in hand. She was looking at him with those green eyes, fully aware now. Her face was still pale, but some color had returned to her cheeks. She tried to sit up, then gasped in pain, her hand going to her bandaged side. "Do not move," Owen said, crossing to the bed quickly. "You will tear your stitches. You were badly hurt." She stared at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. "Who are you?" "Owen Oakley. This is my ranch, about 5 miles outside Hot Springs. You collapsed on my porch 4 days ago, bleeding heavily. I stitched you up." He kept his voice gentle, non-threatening. "What is your name?" She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to determine if she could trust him. Finally, she spoke. "Thea. Thea Thompson." "Well, Miss Thompson, you are lucky to be alive. That was a deep wound on your side. Whatever happened to you, you lost a lot of blood." He pulled his chair closer to the bed, sitting so he would not tower over her. "What did happen? Who hurt you?" Her face closed off immediately, fear flashing in her eyes. "I do not want to talk about it." Owen nodded slowly. He would not push her, not yet. She was still recovering, still weak. "All right, but you should know you are safe here. Whatever or whoever did this, they will not get past me." She studied him for a long moment, taking in his weathered face, his broad shoulders, the genuine concern in his blue eyes. Some of the tension left her body. "Thank you," she whispered, "for helping me, for saving my life. Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said softly, "they would not have." Owen did not know how to respond to that, so he changed the subject. "Are you hungry? I have broth. You need to eat, build your strength back up." She nodded, and he helped her sit up slightly, propping her with his pillow. He brought the broth and spoon, fed her like a child, watching her wince with each movement. When she had eaten as much as she could manage, he helped her lie back down. "How bad is it?" she asked, looking down at the bandages visible above the blanket. "Bad enough. The cut on your side needed about 40 stitches. You have cuts on your arms and hands as well, but those are healing well. Another few days and I can remove the stitches, as long as no infection sets in." "You did all that? You are a doctor." "No, just a rancher, but I have stitched up cattle and horses plenty of times. The principle is the same." He saw her expression and added quickly, "I did my best. I cleaned everything, used whiskey to sterilize. It is not fancy work, but it should hold." "I am sure it is fine," she said, though her voice shook slightly. "I am alive. That is what matters." They sat in silence for a moment. Owen could see exhaustion pulling at her, her eyelids growing heavy. Before she fell asleep again, she spoke once more. Why did you help me? You do not know me. I could be anyone. Owen met her gaze steadily. You were dying on my porch. That is all I needed to know. She smiled faintly, then sleep claimed her again. Owen watched her for a long time, wondering what had brought Thea Thompson to his doorstep, bleeding and alone, wondering what she was running from, and wondering why the sight of her smile, small as it was, had made his chest feel tight. Over the next week, Thea grew stronger. She could sit up without gasping in pain, could take a few steps with Owen's support. He moved his sleeping arrangements to the floor, insisting she keep the bed. They talked in the evenings, tentative conversations that slowly grew more comfortable. She told him she was from Boston, that she was 24 years old, that she had come west with her cousin's family seeking new opportunities. She did not tell him what had happened to her, and he did not press. Owen found himself looking forward to their conversations more than he cared to admit. Thea was educated, well-spoken, with a quick wit that emerged as she healed. She asked him about ranching, about life in South Dakota, about the town of Hot Springs. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about heading west after the war, about building his ranch from nothing over the past 8 years. He had been alone for so long that having someone to talk to felt like a luxury he had not known he was missing. On the 10th day after her arrival, Owen removed her stitches. His hands were steady despite his nervousness, carefully snipping and pulling each thread. The wound had healed into an angry red line, but there was no infection, no separation. It would scar, certainly, but she would have full use of her side. You did good work, Thea said, looking at the healing wound in the small mirror Owen kept for shaving. It could have been much worse. It will fade with time, Owen assured her. The scar, I mean. It will always be there, but it will fade. She turned to look at him, something soft in her expression. I do not mind scars. They remind us we survived. There was a weight to her words that made Owen wonder just what she had survived. But before he could ask, she changed the subject, asking if she might try walking outside for some fresh air. He agreed, helping her to the door and out onto the porch. The September afternoon was beautiful, the sky a brilliant blue, the prairie grass golden in the sunlight. Thea breathed deeply, closing her eyes and tilting her face to the sun. I did not think I would see this again, she said quietly. The sky, the sun. I thought I was going to die that night. Owen stood beside her, close enough to catch her if she faltered. What happened, Thea? She was quiet for so long, he thought she would not answer. Then, still looking at the horizon, she began to speak. My cousin's husband, Robert. He seemed kind at first when I came to stay with them in Rapid City. My cousin Martha was so happy to have me there. But Robert, he started looking at me in ways that made my skin crawl. Then the looks turned to touches, supposedly accidental. Martha did not see it, or maybe she did not want to see it. One night, when Martha had gone to visit her sister in town, he came to my room. Owen's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He had suspected something like this, but hearing it still made his blood boil. I fought him off, Thea continued, her voice steady but hollow. I had a letter opener on my desk. I cut his face, scratched him bloody. He was so angry. He came at me with his belt knife. We struggled and he cut me again and again. I thought he was going to kill me, but I managed to get away, got out of the house. I took one of their horses and just rode. I did not know where I was going. I just rode until I could not stay in the saddle anymore. Then I walked. I do not even remember how I found your place. I just saw a light in the distance and walked toward it. You rode and walked for miles with those injuries, Owen said, his voice rough with emotion. You could have died. I would rather die free than stay there. She finally looked at him, her green eyes fierce despite the pain in them. He would have killed me eventually, or worse. At least running gave me a chance. Owen wanted to ride to Rapid City right then and beat Robert within an inch of his life. But the man Thea needed now was not one seeking vengeance, but one offering safety and support. You are safe here, he said firmly. He will not find you, and if he does, he will regret it. You do not have to protect me, Thea said. I have brought enough trouble to your door already. You did not bring trouble. You brought yourself, injured and needing help. That is all. He turned to face her fully. Stay as long as you need. Stay until you are fully healed and have decided what you want to do next. This is not charity, and you are not a burden. You are welcome here. Tears welled in her eyes, the first he had seen from her. Why are you so kind to me? You do not know me. I know enough, Owen said simply. I know you are brave and strong. I know you fought for your life and refused to give up. I know you have had a hard time, and you deserve kindness. That is enough for me. A tear slid down her cheek, and before Owen could think better of it, he reached up and gently wiped it away with his thumb. The moment felt suspended in time, both of them standing close on the porch, his hand lingering near her face. Then Thea swayed slightly, and the spell broke. Owen immediately steadied her, guiding her back inside. You need to rest, he said, settling her back onto the bed. You have been through too much. But as he stepped back, Thea caught his hand. Thank you, Owen. Truly, I owe you my life. You do not owe me anything, he said gently. But he squeezed her hand before releasing it, and the warmth of her touch stayed with him long after she had fallen asleep. As days turned to weeks, Thea grew stronger. She began helping around the house, insisting she needed to be useful. She cooked, cleaned, mended Owen's worn shirts. He protested at first, but she was stubborn, and he found he enjoyed coming in from his work to find a hot meal waiting, to find his home warm and lived in instead of just functional. They fell into an easy rhythm. Owen would work the ranch during the day while Thea handled the household tasks, being careful not to overexert herself. In the evenings, they would eat together, talk, sometimes sit in comfortable silence. Owen taught her to play poker with matchsticks as betting chips, and she proved a surprisingly skilled player, reading his tells with ease. She told him stories of Boston, of museums and theaters and cobblestone streets. He told her about herding cattle, about spring floods and summer droughts, about the harsh beauty of the prairie. One evening in early October, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Thea said, I should probably think about what comes next. I cannot stay here forever. Owen felt his chest tighten. He had known this moment would come, but he was not ready for it. Where would you go? I do not know, she admitted. I cannot go back to Rapid City. Martha would take Robert's side, I am sure. She always does. And I cannot return to Boston. I have no money for passage, and even if I did, there is nothing for me there. That is why I came west in the first place. You could stay here, Owen said, the words coming out before he could stop them. I mean, if you wanted to. There is plenty of room, and winter is coming. It gets harsh out here. You could stay through the winter at least, and decide in the spring. Thea looked at him, her expression unreadable. Owen, I cannot just live here. People would talk. They would assume things. Let them assume, he said, then paused. Unless you are worried about propriety. I would never, I have been a perfect gentleman, and I would continue to be. You would be safe here, Thea. From Robert, from the winter, from whatever else you need safety from. She smiled softly. I know I would be safe. I trust you completely, which is something I did not think I would say about any man ever again. But Owen, you have already done so much. I cannot take advantage of your kindness. It is not taking advantage if I am offering. He turned to look at her directly. Truth is, I have gotten used to having you here. This place feels more like a home now than it ever has. I would miss you if you left. Something shifted in Thea's expression, a softness that made Owen's heart beat faster. I would miss you too, she said quietly. More than I should, probably. They looked at each other for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Owen knew he was falling for her, had probably been falling since he first heard her voice asking where she was. But he also knew she had been through trauma, that she needed time to heal in more ways than just physical. He would not push, would not add to her burdens. Stay, he said simply. Just stay. We will figure out the rest as we go. Thea nodded slowly. All right. I will stay through the winter. But, Owen, I need to contribute. I need to feel like I am earning my keep, not just accepting charity. You already contribute. You cook, clean, keep the house running. That is worth plenty. Let me do more then. Teach me to help with the ranch. I can feed the horses, tend the chickens if you get some, help with whatever you need. I want to be useful. Owen agreed, and the next day he began teaching her the basics of ranch work. She proved a quick learner, unafraid of hard work despite her refined upbringing. She mucked stalls, hauled water, learned to curry the horses until their coats gleamed. Owen found himself admiring her determination, her refusal to be limited by her past or her injuries. As October progressed, the weather grew colder. Owen made a trip into hot springs for supplies, taking Thea with him. She was nervous about going into town, worried that somehow Robert would find out where she was, but Owen assured her they would be quick and careful. He introduced her to a few of the townspeople as a friend staying with him through the winter, and if anyone thought it improper, they kept their opinions to themselves. At the general store, Owen insisted on buying Thea a proper winter coat, boots, and some warmer dresses. She protested, but he was firm. "You cannot work outside in what you have. Consider it payment for all the work you have been doing." She relented, though he could see she was uncomfortable accepting gifts. Her pride ran deep, and he respected that. But he also was not about to let her freeze because she was too stubborn to accept help. On the ride back to the ranch, Thea was quiet. Finally, she said, "People will talk, about us, about me living with you." "Probably," Owen agreed. "Does that bother you?" "It should. I was raised to care about reputation, about propriety. But honestly, after everything, I find I do not care what strangers think. The people who matter know the truth." "And what is the truth?" Owen asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. "That you saved my life and have been nothing but kind and respectful. That you are a good man, and I am lucky to have found my way to your door." She paused, then added softly, "And that I am happier here, on this isolated ranch with you, than I ever was in society back east." Owen felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. "I am glad you found your way here too, even though I wish the circumstances had been different." They rode in comfortable silence the rest of the way home. Home. When had Owen started thinking of the ranch as their home instead of just his? He supposed it had been gradual, so subtle he had not noticed the shift until it was complete. But now, with Thea beside him, the ranch felt like more than just a place he lived. It felt like a place he belonged, and she belonged there with him. November brought the first snow, light dustings that melted by afternoon. Owen prepared for winter in earnest, stocking up on firewood, checking the barn for leaks, making sure they had enough supplies to last through potential blizzards. Thea worked beside him, her cheeks pink from the cold, her breath misting in the air. She had gained weight since arriving, filling out the hollow places in her cheeks and shoulders. She looked healthy now, vibrant, so different from the pale, bleeding woman who had collapsed on his porch. One evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Thea said, "Tell me about your family. You mentioned growing up in Missouri, but you have never talked about them." Owen was quiet for a moment, poking at the fire with a stick. "My parents died of cholera when I was 16. After that, I worked odd jobs, ended up joining the army during the war, fought for the Union. After it was over, I just wanted to get as far from those memories as possible. So I came west, found this land, filed a claim, built the cabin myself, bought a few head of cattle with my army pay. It has not been easy, but it is mine." "No siblings?" Thea asked gently. "Had a younger sister, Sarah. She died with my parents." Owen stared into the flames. "I was the only one who survived. Sometimes I wonder why. Why me and not them? They were better people than I ever was." Thea reached over and took his hand. "You survived because you are strong, and you have honored their memory by building something good here, by being a good man. That matters, Owen." He looked at their joined hands, then up at her face. "You are the first person I have told about them in years. I usually do not talk about the past. I understand. Some things are too painful to speak aloud." She squeezed his hand. "But thank you for telling me, for trusting me with that." They sat holding hands, watching the fire, and Owen felt something settle in his chest, a sense of rightness, of belonging. He had been alone for so long, had convinced himself he preferred it that way. But sitting here with Thea, her hand in his, he realized he had just been waiting for someone who understood, who had faced their own darkness and survived. Waiting for her. As if reading his thoughts, Thea said, "I never thought I would feel safe with a man again. After Robert, I thought I would carry that fear forever. But with you, I do not feel afraid. I feel protected, but not trapped. Cared for, but not controlled. You have given me back something I thought was lost." "What is that?" Owen asked softly. "Hope," she said simply. "Hope that I can have a life I choose. Hope that not all men are monsters. Hope that I can be happy again." Owen turned to face her fully, still holding her hand. "Thea, I need you to know something. These past weeks having you here, getting to know you, It has meant more to me than I can properly express. You are brave and strong and beautiful, and I am grateful every day that you found your way to my door. I do not want you to feel obligated to me because I helped you, but I also cannot keep pretending I do not feel what I feel." Her green eyes were wide, fixed on his face. "What do you feel?" "That I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "Maybe I have been since the moment I saw you fighting for your life. Maybe it has happened more gradually. But either way, it is true. I am falling in love with you, Thea Thompson, and I needed you to know." For a moment, she just stared at him. Then tears welled in her eyes, but she was smiling. "I thought it was just me," she whispered. "I thought I was crazy for developing feelings for you so quickly. But, Owen, I feel it too. I am falling in love with you too. You have shown me what a real man is supposed to be like. Kind, strong, gentle, protective, without being possessive. You have ruined me for anyone else." Owen reached up and cupped her face with his free hand, his thumb brushing away a tear. "May I kiss you?" "Please," she breathed. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, to pull away. But she did not. She met him halfway, her lips soft against his. The kiss was gentle, tender, full of promise rather than passion. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," Owen admitted. "I have wanted you to," Thea said, then laughed. "This is crazy. 2 months ago, I was running for my life. Now I'm sitting in a cabin in South Dakota, kissing a cowboy I am falling in love with. My Boston friends would not believe it. Do you regret it? Any of it?" "Not for a second. Well, except for the almost dying part that I could have done without." She grew serious. "Owen, I need to be honest with you. I am damaged. What Robert did, what he tried to do, it left scars that are not visible. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still flinch at sudden movements. I am not whole." "None of us are," Owen said firmly. "We have all been damaged by something. But Thea, you are not broken. You are healing, which is different. And I will be patient with you for as long as you need. We can take this at whatever pace you are comfortable with. There is no rush." She kissed him again, longer this time. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "How did I get so lucky to end up at your door?" "I think I am the lucky one," Owen replied. They sat together by the fire until it burned low, holding each other, talking softly about the future. For the first time in his adult life, Owen could picture a future that was not just survival, but joy. A future with Thea by his side, building a life together on this harsh but beautiful land. Winter settled in hard in December. The first real blizzard hit just after Christmas, trapping them inside for 3 days. Owen had prepared well, so they had plenty of food and firewood, but the cabin felt smaller, with both of them confined inside. Not that either minded. They played cards, cooked together, talked for hours. At night, Owen still slept on the floor while Thea took the bed, though both were starting to question the necessity of the arrangement. On the third night of the blizzard, as the wind howled outside and snow piled against the windows, Thea said, "This is silly. The bed is plenty big enough for both of us, and you must be freezing down there." Owen had been freezing, but he was not about to admit it. "I am fine, and your reputation, even out here, matters." "My reputation? Owen, I am an unmarried woman living alone with a man. My reputation is already in tatters by any proper standard. And frankly, I do not care. I trust you completely. Please share the bed. I hate thinking of you cold and uncomfortable." Owen wanted to argue, but the truth was he was tired of sleeping on the hard floor, and the idea of being close to Thea through the cold night was more appealing than he wanted to admit. "All right," he agreed, "but I will stay on top of the blankets, and you tell me immediately if you feel uncomfortable at all." They settled into bed, Owen keeping a respectful distance despite both being under the same blankets after Thea insisted. But sometime in the night, they gravitated toward each other, drawn by warmth and comfort and something deeper. When Owen woke in the early morning, Thea was curled against his side, her head on his chest, one hand resting over his heart. She looked peaceful in sleep, her dark lashes fanned against her cheeks. He carefully wrapped his arm around her, holding her close, and let himself believe this could be his life. Every day, every night, with her beside him. When Thea woke, she stiffened for just a moment, then relaxed. "Good morning," she murmured against his chest. "Morning. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months, maybe years." She tilted her head up to look at him. "Thank you for sharing the bed, and for being a gentleman, even while doing so." "It was not exactly a hardship," Owen said with a slight smile. "Though I will admit, waking up with you in my arms is something I could get very used to." "Then get used to it," Thea said, snuggling closer. "Because I am not going back to sleeping alone, and you are not going back to the floor. This is much better." The blizzard broke later that day, and Owen dug them out, clearing a path to the barn to check on the horses. The world was blanketed in white, pristine and beautiful, despite the cold. Thea came out to help, and they worked together in comfortable silence, falling into the rhythms they had developed over the months. January passed in a blur of cold and snow, of long evenings by the fire and warm nights in bed together. Owen and Thea grew closer each day, learning each other's habits and quirks, building a partnership that went beyond romance. They were a team, facing the harsh winter together, and both knew they would face whatever came after the same way. In February, on a clear, cold day, Owen rode into Hot Springs alone. He had a specific errand to run, one he did not want Thea to know about yet. At the general store, he asked the proprietor, Mr. Henderson, if he had any rings suitable for a proposal. Mr. Henderson smiled knowingly. "For Miss Thompson, I assume. Wondered when you would be coming in for this." "Is it that obvious?" Owen asked, feeling his ears burn. "Son, anyone with eyes can see how you two feel about each other. She's good for you, brings out the best in you." He pulled out a small box containing a few simple rings. These came from a widow who was selling off her late husband's things. Nothing fancy, but they are solid gold. Owen selected a simple band with a small emerald, the stone the same shade as Thea's eyes. It was not an elaborate ring by Boston standards, he was sure, but it was the best he could afford, and he hoped she would love it for what it represented rather than its monetary value. On the ride home, Owen practiced what he would say. He had never proposed to anyone before, had never even seriously courted a woman. But with Thea, it felt natural, right? He wanted to marry her, wanted to build a life with her, wanted to make official what they both already felt in their hearts. That evening, after dinner, Owen led Thea outside. The sky was clear, stars blazing overhead in the cold air. Their breath misted as they stood on the porch, wrapped in heavy coats. "It is beautiful," Thea said, looking up at the stars. "I never saw stars like this in Boston. Too many lights." "Thea," Owen said, taking her hand, "I need to ask you something." She turned to him, her face curious in the moonlight. "What is it?" Owen took a breath, then pulled out the ring. "I know we have not known each other long by conventional standards. Only 5 months. But those 5 months have been the best of my life. You have brought joy and meaning to days that were just about survival before. You have made this house a home. You have made me want things I never let myself want before. A partner, a family, a future that is about more than just getting by." Thea's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide and shining with tears. "I love you, Thea Thompson," Owen continued. "I love your strength, your courage, your laugh, your stubbornness. I love waking up with you beside me and working alongside you during the day. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life loving you if you will let me. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Thea said immediately, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes. I love you too, Owen. I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes. Yes, I will marry you." Owen slipped the ring onto her finger, and she looked at it in wonder. "It is perfect," she whispered. "The stone matches my eyes. That is why I chose it." She threw her arms around his neck, and he lifted her, spinning her around despite the cold and the ice. When he set her down, they kissed, deep and full of promise. This was no gentle, tentative kiss. This was the kiss of two people who knew they had found their future in each other. "When?" Thea asked when they finally pulled apart. "When should we marry?" "As soon as possible," Owen said. "Tomorrow, if we could. But realistically, we need to wait until we can get into town, get the license, find someone to perform the ceremony." "Spring," Thea decided. "Let us marry in the spring when the world is coming back to life. It feels fitting, considering we are starting our life together." Owen agreed, though waiting felt impossible when all he wanted was to call her his wife. But Thea was right. Spring would be perfect. The rest of the winter passed in a haze of happiness. They made plans for the wedding, simple as it would be. They talked about the future, about expanding the ranch, Maybe adding some chickens and pigs, planting a garden. Thea wrote a letter to an old friend in Boston, announcing her engagement, though she did not give details about how they had met. Some things were private, meant only for them. March brought the first thaw, and with it came a problem neither had anticipated. A rider appeared one afternoon while Owen was out checking the fence line. Thea was alone at the cabin, hanging laundry, when she saw the man approaching. Her blood ran cold when she recognized him. Robert. He looked older than she remembered, haggard. A scar ran down the side of his face from where she had cut him, and his eyes burned with an intensity that terrified her. Thea ran for the cabin, but he spurred his horse forward, cutting her off. "Thought you could hide from me, did you?" he snarled, dismounting. "Took me months to track you down, asking at every town and ranch. But I found you, you little whore." "Get off this property," Thea said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You are not welcome here." "Not welcome? You are my property. You owe me for the damage you did, for the pain you caused my family." He advanced on her, and Thea backed toward the cabin. "Martha threw me out, you know. Said I was a monster, said I disgusted her. All because of you." "You are a monster," Thea said fiercely. "What you tried to do to me, what you did do, that is monstrous. Martha was right to throw you out." Robert lunged forward, grabbing her arm. Thea screamed and fought, scratching at his face, kicking at his shins, but he was stronger, pulling her toward his horse. Then she heard hoofbeats, and Owen appeared, riding hard. He took in the scene in an instant, and fury blazed across his face. He was off his horse before it had fully stopped, tackling Robert away from Thea. The two men went down in a tangle of limbs. Robert was bigger, but Owen fought with the desperation of a man protecting the woman he loved. Fists flew, blood spattered. Thea screamed for them to stop, but they did not hear her, locked in their struggle. Owen got the upper hand, pinning Robert to the ground with a knee on his chest. "You have made a mistake coming here," he growled. "A big mistake." "She is mine," Robert spat blood. "I have a claim on her." "You have no claim on anything," Owen said coldly. "She is my fiancée, and if you ever come near her again, I will kill you. That is not a threat, that is a promise. Now get on your horse and ride, and thank whatever God you pray to that I am letting you leave alive." He hauled Robert up and shoved him toward his horse. Robert stumbled, then turned back with pure hatred in his eyes. "This is not over." "Yes, it is," Owen said, and there was something in his voice that must have gotten through, because Robert mounted his horse and rode off without another word. As soon as he was out of sight, Owen turned to Thea, who was shaking. "Are you hurt? Did he hurt you?" "No, you got here in time." She was trembling so hard she could barely stand. "Owen, I am sorry. I brought this to your door. I should have known he would come looking." "This is not your fault," Owen said firmly, pulling her into his arms. "None of this is your fault. He is a predator, and predators always blame their victims. But he is gone now, and he is not coming back." "How can you be sure?" "Because men like that are cowards at heart. I saw it in his eyes. He was counting on you being alone and helpless. He was not expecting to face someone willing to fight for you. He will slink back to whatever hole he crawled out of and stay there." Thea wanted to believe him, but she was terrified. "What if he comes back? What if he waits until you are gone and comes for me?" Owen pulled back enough to look her in the eyes. "Then we make sure you are never alone until we know for certain he is gone for good. And Thea, I meant what I said. If he comes back, I will kill him. I am not a violent man by nature, but I will not let anyone hurt you. Not ever again." She believed him, and strangely, that made her feel safer than she had in months. They went inside, and Owen locked the door, something he had never done before. He checked his rifle, made sure it was loaded and within easy reach. For the next week, he stayed close to the cabin, never venturing far, always within earshot. But Robert did not return. Days passed, then weeks, with no sign of him. Slowly, Thea began to relax again, to believe that Owen had been right, that Robert was gone for good. She started to imagine a future where she did not have to look over her shoulder, where she was truly free of her past. April brought warmer weather and the first wildflowers. The prairie came alive with color, and Thea decided it was time for their wedding. They rode into Hot Springs on a beautiful Saturday morning, Thea wearing a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes, Owen in his best shirt and pants. The ceremony was held in the small church, witnessed by Mr. Henderson and his wife. along with a few other townspeople who had grown fond of the couple. The minister was an old man who had seen countless weddings, but he smiled as he pronounced Owen and Thea husband and wife, recognizing something special in the way they looked at each other. Their kiss was long and sweet, full of the love they had built over the past months. When they pulled apart, both were smiling so wide their faces hurt. "Mrs. Oakley," Owen said, testing out the name. "I like the sound of that," Thea replied, taking his hand. They celebrated with a small meal at the town's only restaurant, then rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting. Their ranch now, officially their home. That night, for the first time, they truly became husband and wife in every sense. Owen was gentle and patient, conscious of Thea's past trauma, letting her set the pace. She was nervous at first, old fears threatening to resurface, but Owen's tender touch and whispered words of love soothed her. This was nothing like her attack. This was beautiful, a joining of two people who loved each other completely. When it was over, they lay tangled together, both teary-eyed and overwhelmed with emotion. "I love you," Thea whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Owen replied, holding her close. "Forever." Their first year of marriage was full of hard work and simple joys. They expanded the ranch, buying more cattle with the money from selling their first calves. Thea planted a garden that flourished under her care, providing vegetables for their table and extras to sell in town. Owen built a chicken coop, and Thea raised chickens that produced eggs in abundance. They worked side by side every day, partners in every sense. There were hard times, of course. A late spring freeze killed some of their calves. A drought in July threatened their water supply. But they faced each challenge together, and somehow that made even the hard times feel manageable. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky, talking about their day, making plans for the future. Sometimes they played cards or read aloud from the few books they owned. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, content in each other's presence. In August, Thea realized she had missed her monthly courses. Then another month passed, and she knew. She was pregnant. She told Owen one evening as they were getting ready for bed, and his reaction was everything she had hoped for. He whooped with joy, picked her up and spun her around, then immediately apologized and set her down gently, worried he had hurt her or the baby. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Thea laughed, but she was touched by his concern. "We are having a baby," Owen said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Thea asked, suddenly nervous. "I know we did not plan this so soon." "Happy? Thea, I am beyond happy. I am ecstatic. Terrified, but ecstatic." He pulled her close, resting his hand on her still flat stomach. "A baby. Our baby." They spent the evening making plans, already imagining what their child would be like. Owen insisted on doing more of the heavy work around the ranch, despite Thea's protests that she was fine, but she let him take care of her, recognizing it was his way of showing love. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Thea had some morning sickness in the early months, but overall she felt healthy and strong. Her belly grew round, and Owen loved to feel the baby kick, his face lighting up with wonder each time. In December, they made the trip to Hot Springs to stock up on supplies before winter truly set in. Mrs. Henderson, the storekeeper's wife, clucked over Thea like a mother hen, giving her advice about labor and babies and motherhood. Thea listened patiently, grateful for the guidance even if some of it seemed contradictory. As they were loading their supplies into the wagon, the sheriff approached them. "Owen, Thea, got something you should know." They both tensed. "What is it?" Owen asked. "Had word from Rapid City. Robert Jennings was found dead last month. Drinking accident, fell off his horse and broke his neck." The sheriff watched their reactions carefully. "Thought you would want to know, given the trouble he caused you last spring." Thea felt a wave of emotions. Relief, certainly, but also a strange sadness, not for Robert himself, but for the waste of a life, for the man he could have been if he had chosen differently. "Thank you for telling us," she said quietly. On the ride home, Owen took her hand. "How are you feeling?" "Strange. I should be happy he is gone, that he can never threaten us again. And I am relieved, but I also feel sad, which makes no sense." "It makes perfect sense. You are a compassionate person, Thea, even toward those who do not deserve it. That is one of the things I love about you." He squeezed her hand. "But he is gone now. Truly. finally gone, you can move forward without that shadow hanging over you. Thea realized he was right. She had been carrying fear in the back of her mind, always worried Robert would return. Now that fear could die with him. She was free, completely free to embrace her new life without the past haunting her. Their first winter as a married couple was harsh, but they weathered it together, warm and safe in their cabin. Thea's belly grew enormous, and by February she was uncomfortable and ready to be done being pregnant. She joked that she felt like a cow, to which Owen replied that she was the most beautiful cow he had ever seen, earning him a swat with a dish towel and a laugh. On a cold March morning, Thea's labor began. Owen rode hard to fetch Mrs. Henderson, who had agreed to help with the birth. The next hours were the longest of Owen's life. He paced outside the bedroom area they had curtained off, listening to Thea's labored breathing and occasional cries of pain. He felt helpless, useless, desperate to take her pain away. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was actually only about 6 hours, he heard a new sound. A baby's cry, high and strong. Mrs. Henderson pulled back the curtain with a smile. "You have a son, Owen, a healthy, strong boy." Owen rushed to Thea's side. She looked exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "Owen, meet your son," she said softly, tears running down her face. Owen looked at the tiny face, red and scrunched up, eyes closed, mouth open in another cry. His son, his, and Thea's son. Love hit him like a physical force, so intense it nearly drove him to his knees. "He is perfect," Owen breathed. "You are perfect. Thank you, Thea. Thank you for this gift." They named him Thomas after Owen's father, Thomas Owen Oakley. Little Tommy, they called him, though Thea insisted they would use his full name when he was grown. The first few weeks with a newborn were exhausting and overwhelming. Tommy needed to eat constantly, and Thea was tired from feeding him and recovering from birth. But Owen helped as much as he could, changing diapers, walking Tommy when he was fussy, taking over household chores so Thea could rest. Watching Thea with their son, seeing her nurse him and sing to him and look at him with such fierce love, made Owen fall in love with her all over again. She was an amazing mother, patient and gentle and completely devoted to Tommy's well-being. As spring arrived and Tommy grew, they settled into a new rhythm as a family of 3. Tommy was a happy baby, quick to smile, and both Owen and Thea were completely besotted with him. Owen would talk to his son while doing chores, explaining what he was doing, imagining the day when Tommy would be old enough to help. One evening in May, as they sat on the porch watching Tommy sleep in his basket, Thea said, "Can you believe it has been almost 2 years since I stumbled onto your porch, bleeding and half dead?" Owen shook his head. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. I remember seeing you lying there, all that blood, and thinking I had to save you. I had no idea you would end up saving me too." "I saved you? How?" "You gave me a reason to live instead of just survive. You gave me love, family, purpose beyond just working the ranch. You gave me everything, Thea." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We saved each other then, and we built something beautiful together." They sat in silence, watching the sun set over their land, their home. The prairie stretched out before them, golden in the fading light. Somewhere in the distance, their cattle lowed. Tommy made a small sound in his sleep, and both parents immediately turned to check on him, smiling when they saw he was fine. "I want more," Thea said suddenly. "More children, I mean. Is that crazy? Tommy is only 2 months old, and I am already thinking about more babies." Owen laughed. "Not crazy. I want more too. As many as you are willing to have. This house needs to be full of children and life and joy." "Then we will fill it," Thea promised. "We will build a family as big and strong as this land." Over the next several years, they did just that. Thea gave birth to a daughter, Sarah, when Tommy was 2. Then another son, James, 2 years after that. Then finally, another daughter, Elizabeth. When Thea was 31 and declared she was done having babies, that 4 was plenty. Their house expanded with their family. Owen built additional rooms, a larger kitchen, a proper bedroom for him and Thea. The ranch prospered, growing from their initial few cattle to a sizable herd. They hired help during the busy seasons, young men from town looking for work. But the core of the operation was always Owen and Thea, working side by side as they had from the beginning. The children grew up strong and happy, free to roam the prairie under their parents' watchful eyes. Tommy inherited his father's quiet strength and love of the land. Sarah had her mother's determination and quick mind. James was the adventurer, always getting into scrapes that gave his parents gray hairs. And Elizabeth, the baby, had both parents wrapped around her tiny finger, able to charm her way out of any trouble. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen took Thea back to Hot Springs for a rare night away from the children. Mrs. Henderson agreed to watch them, and Owen and Thea stayed at the town's small hotel. It was not fancy, but having a night alone together, without children demanding attention or chores needing to be done, felt like the height of luxury. As they lay in bed that night, Thea curled against Owen's side. She said, "Do you ever regret it, taking me in that day? Your life would have been so much simpler if you had just left me there." Owen turned to look at her, truly shocked. "Regret? Thea, finding you on my porch was the best thing that ever happened to me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children, our life together, it is more than I ever dreamed of having. I regret nothing. Not even the hard times, the drought of '86, the winter James got so sick we thought we would lose him, the constant work and worry. Not even those. Because we faced them together, and we came through them stronger. Thea, every single day with you is a gift, even the hard days. Especially the hard days, because those are the ones that show us what we are made of, what our love is made of." Tears filled Thea's eyes. "I love you so much, more now than even on our wedding day, which I did not think was possible. I know, I feel the same." He kissed her forehead. "Here is to 10 more years, and 10 after that, and 10 after that, for as long as we are given." "Forever," Thea whispered. "I will love you forever, Owen Oakley." They made love that night with the passion of newlyweds, but the knowledge and comfort of longtime partners. And in the morning, they rode back to their ranch, back to their children, back to the life they had built together. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their children's lives. Tommy grew into a fine young man, serious and hard-working like his father. At 18, he told his parents he wanted to stay on the ranch, to help expand it, to eventually take it over when Owen was ready to step back. Owen could not have been more proud. Sarah was smart as a whip, devouring every book she could get her hands on. At 16, she announced she wanted to be a teacher, and Owen and Thea supported her dream, sending her to the normal school in Pierre for training. She came home during summers and holidays, full of stories and ideas, making them all laugh with her observations about city life. James, true to his adventurous nature, joined a cattle drive north at 17, wanting to see more of the world before settling down. Thea worried constantly, but Owen reminded her that young men needed to test themselves, to find their own way. James came home after a year, leaner and tougher, with stories that made his younger sister's eyes go wide. Elizabeth, their baby, showed signs of inheriting her mother's stubbornness and her father's gentle nature in equal measure. At 12, she could ride as well as any cowboy and had a gift with animals that amazed everyone who saw it. She declared she would never leave the ranch, that it was the best place in the world, and Owen and Thea exchanged smiles, remembering when they had felt the same newness of building a life together here. On a warm June evening in 1897, when Owen was 45 and Thea was 41, they sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. But this time, they were watching their oldest son, Tommy, court a young woman from town, walking with her around the property, clearly smitten. "He is going to marry her," Thea said, watching them with a smile. "I know, he has that look, the same look I had when I fell for you." Owen took her hand, noting the calluses from years of work, the few age spots starting to appear. Her hand in his felt as right now as it had 15 years ago. "Do you think they will be as happy as we have been?" Thea asked. "I hope so, but what we have, what we built, it is rare. We both know that." Owen looked at his wife, at the streaks of gray in her dark hair, at the lines around her eyes from years of squinting in the sun and laughing. She was more beautiful to him now than she had been at 24. "We are lucky, Thea. Against all odds, we found each other." "You saved my life," Thea said, squeezing his hand. "And you gave me a reason to live mine," Owen replied. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son and his intended, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The prairie stretched out before them, their land, their home. Inside the house, they could hear their other children moving about, the sounds of family and life and love. Tommy did marry his sweetheart, a sweet girl named Rebecca, that fall. The wedding was held at the ranch, with half the town attending. Owen and Thea hosted the celebration, proud to show off their home and their family. As they watched Tommy and Rebecca dance their first dance as husband and wife, Thea leaned against Owen. "Our baby is married," she said, wiping away tears. "How did we get so old?" "We are not old," Owen protested. "We are seasoned." Thea laughed. "Seasoned? I like that." Tommy and Rebecca built a small house on the far side of the ranch property, close enough to help with the operation, but far enough to have their own space. Within a year, they made Owen and Thea grandparents with the birth of a daughter they named Thea, after her grandmother. Holding her tiny namesake, Thea Oakley cried tears of joy, overwhelmed by the continuation of the family she and Owen had created. Sarah came home from teaching for summers and eventually met a lawyer from Pierre, a good man named David, who loved her fierce intelligence and independent spirit. They married when she was 23, and though they lived in the city, they visited often, always welcomed with open arms. James, after his adventures, settled down with a rancher's daughter from a spread 20 miles north. They added their own small ranch to the growing Oakley holdings, working in partnership with the main property. He and his wife Margaret had 3 sons in quick succession, wild boys who kept everyone on their toes. Elizabeth, true to her word, stayed home, becoming Owen's right hand as he slowly began to step back from the day-to-day operations. She never married, declaring herself perfectly happy managing the ranch and helping with all the nieces and nephews that kept appearing. Thea worried sometimes that Elizabeth was lonely, but her daughter insisted she was content, and eventually Thea believed her. As Owen and Thea entered their 50s, they began to truly slow down. The ranch was running well under Tommy and Elizabeth's management, with James contributing from his own property. Sarah visited often with her children, filling the house with noise and energy. They were surrounded by family, by the fruits of their decades of labor and love. One evening, 25 years after their wedding, Owen and Thea walked out to the spot where the cabin had first stood. They had expanded so much over the years that the original structure was now just one small part of a much larger house. But this spot, where Thea had collapsed bleeding on Owen's porch, where he had carried her inside and saved her life, where their love story had begun, this spot was sacred to both of them. "I never told you," Thea said quietly, "what I was thinking that night. When I was stumbling through the dark, bleeding, knowing I was dying, I saw your light in the distance, and I remember thinking it looked like a star fallen to earth. I walked toward it, praying with every step that I would make it, that whoever lived there would help me. And then I saw your porch, and it looked like salvation. And then everything went black." Owen pulled her close. "I am so glad you made it, so glad you found your way here to me. Not as glad as I am." She looked up at him, this man who had saved her life and given her a future beyond her wildest dreams. "I would do it all again, Owen. Every painful step through the dark, every drop of blood, if I knew it would lead me here, to you, to this life." "You will not have to," Owen said, kissing the top of her head. "From now on, we walk together, always." They stood there as the sun set, 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful. Around them, the ranch bustled with family. Their children's voices called to one another. Grandchildren laughed and played. The cattle lowed in the distance, a sound that had become as familiar as their own heartbeats. This was their legacy. Not just the land or the cattle or the buildings, but the family they had created, the love they had nurtured, the life they had built together. Starting from that night when a dying woman collapsed on a lonely cowboy's porch, they had created something that would last generations. As the stars came out, the same stars that had witnessed the beginning of their story, Owen and Thea walked back to their house hand in hand. Inside, their family was gathering for dinner, everyone talking at once, the table crowded and warm. This was home. This was love. This was the life they had fought for, had built together, had cherished every single day. And it was more than either of them had ever dared to dream. Years continued to unfold like the petals of the prairie flowers Thea loved so much. The turn of the century came and went, marked by a celebration that brought the entire extended family together. Owen was 57, Thea 53, and they marveled at how their lives had turned out. When I was young, Owen told his grandchildren one evening as they clustered around him on the porch, I thought I would live my whole life alone. I thought that was my fate, to work this land by myself until I was too old to continue. I never imagined I would have all of this. He gestured to encompass not just the thriving ranch, but the family surrounding him. Tell us again how you met grandmother, one of Tommy's daughters begged. It was their favorite story, though they had heard it dozens of times. Owen looked at Thea, who was holding their youngest grandchild, a baby girl of 6 months. She smiled at him, her green eyes still as bright as the day he first saw them open in his bed, looking at him with confusion and trust mixed together. Your grandmother came to me on the darkest night, Owen began, his voice taking on the cadence of a practiced storyteller. She was hurt and frightened, running from something terrible. She collapsed on my porch, and I carried her inside, and I worked through the night to save her life. I stitched her wounds, I cleaned her cuts, I prayed she would survive, and she did. She was the strongest person I had ever met, fighting to live when most would have given up. And then they fell in love, one of the older grandchildren finished, smiling. And then we fell in love, Thea confirmed. Though it did not happen all at once, it grew slowly, like a seed planted in good soil. We got to know each other, learned to trust each other, became friends first. And then one day, we realized that we could not imagine life without each other. That is the best kind of love, Owen said, reaching over to take Thea's free hand. The kind that grows from friendship and respect. The kind that lasts. The grandchildren accepted this wisdom with the solemnity of youth, storing it away for when they would need it in their own lives. And Owen and Thea exchanged a glance that spoke of the decades they had shared, the trials they had overcome, the love that had sustained them through everything. In the spring of 1907, when Owen was 64 and Thea was 60, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. Their children organized a party that seemed to include half of South Dakota. People came from all over, friends and neighbors and family, filling the ranch house and spilling out into the yard. There was food and music and dancing, and Owen and Thea held court like the king and queen they were, at least in the eyes of their family. As the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Tommy approached his parents with a gift. It was a large photograph, professionally taken in Hot Springs, showing Owen and Thea surrounded by all their children, grandchildren, and even 2 great-grandchildren who had recently arrived. The family had grown to an astonishing size, and looking at the photograph, both Owen and Thea felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This is our legacy, Tommy said quietly. Everything you two built, starting from nothing. We wanted you to have this, to see what you created. Thea cried, of course. She had become more emotional with age, though she still had the steel core that had allowed her to survive that terrible night so long ago. Owen held her, his own eyes suspiciously bright as they looked at the photograph that represented their entire world. Thank you, Owen managed to say. Thank you all. For this, for everything. For being the family your mother and I always dreamed of. As night fell and the last guest departed, Owen and Thea found themselves alone on the porch once more. It had become their sacred space, the place where they reconnected at the end of each day, where they talked about everything and nothing, where they simply existed together. 30 years, Thea marveled, leaning against Owen's shoulder. 30 years since we spoke our vows in that little church. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I know what you mean. Sometimes I still feel like that young man who found you on his porch, terrified and determined to save you. Other times, I feel ancient, like I have lived 1,000 lives. Owen kissed her hair, breathing in the scent of her, familiar and beloved. But every single day, I have been grateful you found your way to me. And I have been grateful you did not turn me away, that you had the courage to help a stranger, to open your home and your heart. Thea was quiet for a moment, then said, Owen, I need you to know something. If I died tomorrow, I would die happy. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. You gave me safety, love, family, purpose. You gave me everything. You are not dying tomorrow, Owen said firmly, though the thought of losing her made his chest ache. We have years left, you and I. We are going to be 2 of those ancient people who live forever, driving our children crazy with our stubbornness. Thea laughed, the sound as bright and clear as it had been when she was young. Deal. We will be stubborn together, just like we have been everything else together. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. The prairie stretched out before them, dark and vast, but they were not afraid. They had each other, they had their family, they had built something that would outlast them both. What more could anyone ask for? As they finally rose to go inside, their bodies moving slower than they once had, but still together, still in sync, Owen paused at the door. He looked back at the porch, remembering that dawn when he had found Thea lying there, broken and bleeding. If someone had told him then that she would become his wife, the mother of his children, the love of his life, he never would have believed it. Life, he had learned, was stranger and more wonderful than any story could capture. "What are you thinking?" Thea asked, seeing the expression on his face. "That I am the luckiest man alive," Owen replied simply. "That everything good in my life started the night you collapsed on my porch." "Then I am glad I made it those last few steps," Thea said with a smile. "Even though I do not remember them, some part of me knew I needed to reach you, that you were my salvation." "We saved each other," Owen corrected. "Never forget that. I was just surviving before you. You taught me how to live." They went inside together, closing the door on another day, another year, another chapter of their life together. The house settled around them, full of memories and love, and the echoes of all the people who had made it a home. In their bedroom, Owen helped Thea with the buttons on her dress, his fingers less nimble than they once had been, but still gentle. She helped him with his boots, teasing him about how he still refused to admit he needed help with anything. As they lay in bed, the same bed where Owen had placed Thea all those years ago, where he had stitched her wounds and prayed for her survival, where they had shared 30 years of love and intimacy and quiet moments, they held each other close. "I love you," Thea whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Owen replied, the words as true and necessary as the first time he had spoken them. Forever and always. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, two souls who had found each other against impossible odds and never let go. Outside, the South Dakota wind whispered through the grass, carrying the secrets of the prairie. The stars wheeled overhead, constant and eternal. And in the house Owen had built with his own hands, in the bed where their love story had truly begun, two people who had saved each other slept peacefully, surrounded by the life they had created together. Their story was one of blood and survival, of courage and healing, of love that grew from the darkest circumstances into something beautiful and lasting. It was a story that would be told and retold by their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a story that would become legend in their family. But more than that, it was a story that was lived every single day, in the choices they made, in the love they shared, in the family they built. From that terrible night when Thea collapsed on Owen's porch, bleeding and dying, to this peaceful evening 30 years later, they had traveled a journey neither could have imagined. They had built a life, a family, a legacy. They had proven that love could bloom even in the harshest circumstances, that two broken people could heal each other, that hope and determination could overcome any obstacle. And as they dreamed together, their hearts beating in rhythm after decades of synchronicity, the ranch they had built continued around them, a living testament to everything they had achieved. Their children slept in their own homes, secure in the knowledge that their parents' love had created the foundation they all stood on. Their grandchildren dreamed their own dreams, shaped by the stories they had heard and the example they had seen. The night deepened, and still Owen and Thea slept peacefully. Two people who had found their home in each other, who had built their heaven right here on the hard prairie of South Dakota. They had started with nothing but determination and ended with everything that mattered. And if that was not a story worth telling, worth living, worth celebrating, then nothing was. Their love story, born from tragedy and blood loss and desperate survival, had transformed into something that would last generations. And every year, on the anniversary of that fateful night, their family would gather and remember the woman who collapsed on a cowboy's porch, and the cowboy who carried her inside and worked through the night to save her life, never knowing he was saving his own life too. That was their story. That was their legacy. That was their love. And it was eternal.